Welcome to another episode of the Career Keynotes podcast with Tincup and Gardiner, where William and Andrew chop it up with respected Silicon Valley talent acquisition and HR leaders to get the real story behind their career journeys, along with an insider's view of how companies engage with candidates. Let's face it, these days, finding the job, much less nailing down an interview, is not easy. This is a rare opportunity to learn firsthand what companies are looking for in a candidate and the best ways to engage with them. And now, here are William and Andrew.
Welcome to the show, Juliet.
Thank you.
It's an honor to have you. I've been looking forward to this for a while. So I've known you for several years, but obviously the audience doesn't know who you are. So could you just give us, at a really high level, we'll drill down, but 2 minutes on Juliet Peniston, who you are and what you're about.
Sure. So I'm Juliet Peniston. I head up recruiting for Roku. I am located out of the Austin office. So I'm in Austin, Texas, and have been here for about 13 years. Left the Bay Area a while ago. Thought I was going to go back, but never did. I also have, a husband and 2 daughters. So I'm pretty busy with preteens and trying to get them through school, especially in this crazy COVID Zoom world.
Wow, that was less than 2 minutes. Well, no, I know you could go on, and I've got a lot of questions, and I'm sure William does too. So Juliet, I often say, hey, a lot of people when they're entering the job market after school, or maybe they didn't go to college, but they're going to start their career. Some people are, I'm going to be an astronaut, or I'm going to be a policeman, or I'm going to be a doctor. But I've met very few people that said, you know what, when I grow up, I'm going to be a head of TA. So it would be really interesting to hear your journey. And you don't have to start, it was a dark and windy day, but it would be really interesting to hear your narrative on how you got there and some of the touch points along the way.
Sure. So growing up, I thought I was going to be a lawyer because I can argue with the best of them. But that didn't happen. So I actually, out of school, I went into hospitality and I was managing restaurants. And I think like everybody's, you nailed it. I've only met one person who knew that she was going to be a recruiter. And that was a gal who I used to work with. And her uncle was a executive recruiter for Russell Reynolds. And she used to watch him as a little kid on the phone all day long. So she wanted a job where you can talk on the phone all day long. But other than her, I'm like, 99% of everybody else, recruiting fell in my lap. And actually I was mentioned, I was managing restaurants at a pretty early age. And I recruited somebody who then in turn recruited me to become a recruiter. So that's how my whole cycle went. I started out, I left the restaurant industry, left Little Pismo Beach where I grew up and lived for 27 years and moved to the Bay Area and started working for Tech Systems, which is an agency. Super fortunate. I think that was a great way for me to really start out in the recruiting world. You learn discipline on systems and processes. You learn the sense of urgency, and you got to get scrappy, and you have to learn also really good customer and candidate experience. So very fortunate that I did that. I went through that for about 3 years and then moved on in-house. And I was actually recruited to Sun Microsystems as a contractor. I tripled my pay in one day, which was super awesome. I could totally afford to live in the Bay Area at that point. And worked for Sun. I was doing the recruiting for all of the PMs in the PPD group and built out a group from literally worked with the VP and one other person and built their team out to 50 plus. And then unfortunately at that time, which I'm very much dating myself, was the dot bomb. And I was a contractor, and so Sun was not doing so well. So I got the heads up to start looking elsewhere, and I did. I went to a small company called Marimba, and that was my first full-time, also in-house opportunity. And from there, I learned I was the only recruiter. So I was able to not only recruit for tech, which is what I really kind of grew up doing, I was responsible for everything. And so that's where my entrance into recruiting salespeople and marketing folks who love to talk. So it was actually very different. But I was doing it all. So I kind of got the best of both worlds. So I was, talking with very technical folks, and then I got to, chat and mingle with a lot of salesy people. Kind of found my niche a little bit on the sales side. So when I did make the move to Business Objects as an individual contributor, and then pretty quickly moved into a management role, I supported all my team, and I supported all of the revenue generating positions. And that was across the Americas, and we had a big presence in Canada. So I did quite a bit of Canada, Latin America, and the US. And then from there, I just went global. So I kind of moved with one leader. I was super fortunate to meet a leader named Jonathan Schoonmaker, who was over at the CHR over at Marimba. And then he took me from Marimba when it got acquired to be by BMC. He took me to Business Objects. From Business Objects, we went to Borland together, where then I owned all of TA for Borland. Yes, Borland, which is, it was still alive back then, it was still going. And then I went there, and that's where I got my head of all of TA and my start in a much more global organization. So from there, it's a little bit of history. That's where I moved to Austin. So I've been here for about 13 years, as I mentioned. We relocated, they actually moved headquarters. So, and it was a very confidential, kind of crazy time where we had to literally build out an entire corporate side of the house, with being very, in Austin, but not being able to let that get out to powers that be outside of, just a small kind of confidential group. Did that, and then moved on to another company. I was there for several years. And then I moved to VMware, and VMware is where I would say probably the start, like the biggest pivoting point in my career. And so I was super fortunate to work at VMware. I was there, started in as an individual contributor, and was heading up recruiting for customer support. And then I would say less than 6 months, I was promoted into a director level, and then I was able to head up all of the Americas, again, revenue generating G&A type roles. And then it turned into another global role. So by the time I was done, 6.5 years with VMware, I was at 150 people in my team. And they were across the globe. We were hiring about 800 people per quarter. It was just a massive machine that was turning out and hiring some really solid folks. I am very thoughtful in when I make moves. And so when I decided to make the move, once now I felt pretty established as a leader, I really recognized that I love the building and the creating things. Albeit VMware, when I was there, it was 4,500 people. They really operated in as far as the staffing organization, very much like a startup. And so we really built and built and built. And again, to build and fine tune a great machine. So I knew I wanted to go back to that building phase. And also I've worked at huge companies, Sun Microsystems, VMware by the time I left was a very large company, tiny little company in Marimba, and everything in between. And so for me, but I'd never done a startup. And so I thought, my next move was I really want to go to a startup, want to be able to take my experiences that I've learned and bring them to a company that was big enough that I could leverage my experience, but still scrappy and small enough where I can, really have an impact on of shaping that organization. So I did that, got the opportunity to do that over at Cloudera, and worked there for about 3.5 years. Did a lot of great work and had a lot of fun there. And when I started realizing that my next venture was coming up, again, very thoughtful and very planned and very prescriptive on where I was going to go. I knew I wanted to go I knew I wanted to go to B2C. So I've always done B2B, business to business. And I've always supported organizations and companies that I had no idea what their tech, I mean, I knew from a high level what their technology did. I had no hands-on experience with it. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a techie person at all. So I was super fortunate to be able to, have the experience that I had, but then I'd wanted to see what the whole B2C was and being an actual consumer and knowing and really understanding whatever it was that I was going to go to. And as lots of things kind of happened, Roku landed on my lap. I was actually looking at much larger companies because in my mind, I thought I was going to go back to a big company with deep, deep pockets. Um, but I started recognizing that those companies were phenomenal, but they were very narrowly scoped roles. Larger organizations, but far more narrow scoped. And so I just, after having multiple conversations with those companies and then with Roku, just realized that I love to build and create. I like to be a key decision maker or key owner of various functions within the organization, not just be a key stakeholder. And so that's what led me to Roku.
Well, first of all, that's a fantastic journey. I have to go back to the beginning though, because one of the things I want to ask you is about your work in the restaurant industry. I've had this theory for a while that those that kind of come up either through retail or hospitality or food service, that that somehow they're akin, they have a stronger kinship with customers because they've been on a bunch of terrible customer experiences. You know, they've been at that intersection point, right, where, you know, customers are unhappy about, you know, the bill, you know, the experience, whatever. Do you think that your experience in the restaurant industry in particular, do you think that's impacted you as a recruiter? And also, do you look for that when you recruit other recruiters? Do you look for like their backgrounds and whether or not they've had to interact with customers and things like that?
For sure. I would say if you
Uh-oh.
work in a restaurant, you can literally work with anybody. People are crazy out there and you have to work with all kinds. And you obviously have to tailor your personality to theirs. And so I'm an absolute chameleon. I know that. So I can, have great fun, funny conversations, be very chatty with some. And then there's some who just, they want to get their stuff and you have to have a very different, probably more professional demeanor with them. So 1,000%, I think, when I look, I would say absolutely, it helped me become a good, very strong recruiter because I just, again, knew how to work with all types of personalities and I could switch on and off in an instant, which is what I'd have to do when I'd bounce from one table to the next or, engage one group party to the other. And so that's very helpful. I'm going to force my children to work in restaurants. They both know this. So my girls will 1,000% have to work in a restaurant. Because I just do think that is that is key in order to really understand people and who they are. Not necessarily just for recruiting. I think it's just great life skills in general. I won't let them go into retail because they're going to spend all their paycheck like I would. So they'll just buy all the clothes. No.
Shows would last all day because you've just said so much good stuff, and so have you, William. I imagine your hospitality restaurant stuff serves you well in your approach to dealing with your clients or the hiring managers and keeping them happy. And little known fact, producer Bev managed a Nordstrom, so she's you can do that. Is to your point, William, you can do anything. And I agree with you. I think everybody has to work at McDonald's for at least 6 months just to know, what it's like. And because you just think, oh, that poor person. And then so anyways, I agree. And how did you raise those kids during that narrative? I mean, that was amazing. I couldn't have done half of what you just described with nothing else going on. So very impressive. So what do you think are what have you learned the most as all the stuff you've done certainly served you well to your where you are now and played a role, but what do you think is the hardest thing about your job? And what do you think, that you do really well based upon your experience to solve for that?
There's a lot of things I get to think of. So I think managing expectations is a big deal, and helping the business, not just the business and the leaders, but also finance and how everything comes together with recruiting. Because when I think of, as we're planning right now around headcount, I have to help the business, help finance, and help all the leaders understand that, yes, you can give me this number of hiring targets. I have to plan for my team. And I, like a sales organization, have a ramp up period too. And so to say I can only hire in, the first quarter, when the expectation, we typically front load that I've got to hire X amount of folks in that first quarter, I'm having to constantly educate them on, here's when my time starts and here's what I need. And delaying opening requisitions will delay us, will impact our hiring targets. And so I think that's kind of one of the biggest things. I can turn off the spigot very quickly. I cannot turn it back on as fast as they would like. And so those are some of the things, and that I would say probably is the most difficult thing, because I feel like I have to come in and educate every single time I come into an organization, have to educate them on that.
I was about to say that's where you start. Even when you're interviewing with them, you're educating them at that point. It's you're starting there. Like, okay, the budget that you put in front of me, yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. Because Andrew's mentioned hiring managers, I think it's really interesting because of over the course of the arc and the places that you've been at, you've worked with probably at this point hundreds, if not thousands, of hiring managers. What's some of your tips and tricks of working with hiring managers? Like, what do you advise when your when your recruiters come into your office or get you on a call and go, I have no idea. Like, how do you coach them? How do you talk them off the ledge? how do you
And
how do you coach them to deal with hiring managers?
yeah, I'm definitely a counselor. I should have a couch in my office for sure. So I talk to a lot of people off the ledge all the time. And thankfully, I've got some of my cohorts that talk me off the ledge too. So you definitely have to find that. I would say, it would just depend on the situation. But the one thing that I always tell the folks in my team is, a lot of the frustration comes from managers who think they know everything about recruiting and and they know everything about your job. And so um, I think part of the reason why I've been successful is because I've gone in at an early age. I got this advice, and I think it was great. Was not early age, I would say, because I started pretty late, but I would say at an early stage of my career, I was basically told is, you're the recruiting guru, right? You're the recruiter, you're the expert here. Why are you allowing your hiring manager to drive the process or tell you how to do this? And so that's the one thing, is go in knowing that you're the expert. You've hired many people in your time, and you've hired them really well, and you've worked with, the best managers and great companies and stuff. And so just going in there with that, air of confidence, and knowing that you know what to do, and sitting down, and the first initial engagement is key, is where you just sit down and tell the manager, all right, let me just tell you how it's going to be done, right? And that should be your strategic talent, your strategic talent discussion conversation or intake meeting, whatever you want to call it, where you sit down and say, here's the process, here's how it's going to work, here are my expectations of you, here's what you can expect of me, walk through a timeline, and go from there. And always calibrate and make sure that you're in touch, and hold them accountable, because I will tell you, they will hold you accountable. So, for me, it's just own that process and know that you're the recruiter. I'm not an engineer. I have no idea how to code. I would never imagine telling an engineering leader how to do their jobs. So, again, kind of think of, they shouldn't be telling you how to do your job, or shouldn't be driving your job for you.
Great answer.
Love it.
Your answer about managing expectations is just good for anything. One of the things I've observed when I talk to you or work with you on different things is the way you're able to balance the flexibility and consultative empathic piece with getting stuff done. And to your point, being a leader, being the expert, this is how we're going to do it, and not being like, hey, you'll get nothing and like it, but balancing that. And I think that's a really a probably not so obvious component to your success and the success of any TA leader. So, Juliet, is there anything you think that you wish you did better, or that kind of surprised you about TA, or that, William, I like this question often asked, what keeps you up at night? I know there's tons and tons of challenges and we've only got a finite amount of time here, but is there anything, at a high level that you think, wow, gosh, I wish I knew this more, or I did this better? Are there any kind of, like, I love the feedback, just that nugget you said. Someone once told me, anytime someone, I don't know if you noticed, but when we watching this, I leaned in, everybody leaned in. Someone once told me, oh, okay. So, but is there anything along those lines that come to mind for you?
I would say there's a lot that I probably would have done differently, had I known what I know now. But I think, one of the biggest things is I would have, I wished I would have had that, that confidence in knowing that I know what I'm doing, that I'm the expert, far earlier than my conversation, right, into my career. And just, I think that's the biggest piece. I don't necessarily know if I would have advanced more in my career, if I would have done anything differently. Quite frankly, I don't think so. But I do feel like some of those earlier struggles would have been a heck of a lot easier to go through. And so, I guess my biggest advice too for people is just be confident in yourself. You know what you're doing, and these managers and candidates rely on you to be the expert, and just do the best that you can. And, you talked a bit about empathy and how I kind of balance that. It's because I've been there and done that, and I get it. Like I get the struggle. And so, and I've got a lot of, when people say, have you gone through this? Oh, I've done that. There are a lot of things people learn from me, what not to do, because those are things I probably had already done. Again, and learn from your mistakes, for heaven's sakes. That was something I did, instilled in my brain as a child from my parents, is like, you make mistakes, perfectly fine, just don't do them again. Yeah. And so, learn from some of the things, and we've all made some, I've made some really good ones. But I've learned from those, and I try not to make them again.
That's probably something you're teaching your girls as well. So you're going to make mistakes. It's just a question of, are you going to continue to make the same mistakes twice, three times? Exactly. So let me ask you about your toughest, without naming names and things like that, your toughest assignment. And I'm always curious when someone's given an assignment, like somebody says, okay, I need you to do this, ... And you have this FUD mode, this fear, uncertainty, and doubt moment, like, oh my God, why me? Tell us again, without naming names, if you don't want to, what was your approach to those tough assignments, and then how were you successful?
Sure. So this was a real fun one. We at a couple companies that I've worked at, one in particular, we would do a little bit of downsizing. So they reprioritized quite often, I would say, at least once or twice a year. And we had just gone through a reprioritization exercise, which in recruiting case can tend to impact some of the resources and the people on the team. And so we've scaled back significantly, which is, the direction that we were given and what we had to do in order to achieve the expense goals that they were looking for. And then with added doubt, which I knew this was going to happen, we went from, cutting out and reprioritizing several hundred requisitions to the floodgates opened. And one in particular, the floodgates opened for an organization that we actually divested, and then they rebuilt it. So And we had to rebuild it from scratch. And we weren't just going to rebuild to the same level or the same number of employees in this group. We were literally going to double it. So I get a call on, it was Wednesday afternoon, because I remember this. It was midway through the week, and the call was that we had to hire 320 people in one quarter for this organization. So, and again, I already cut out my team significantly. I think I had to reduce like 20 resources from the team between recruiters and sourcers. So I was just deer in the headlights going, and it just has to get done. And part of this too is this, managers' expectations and leaders and finance thinking, oh, this can just be done. It's not a problem. So I gulped. I pounded a bottle of wine that night and I regrouped. And the next day I got my team together. I think that's the big thing, is leverage your team always.
Yes.
Got my team together. We put our heads together, say, all right, what's going to be needed? What can we do? And what we did was, part of it, we knew we had to educate it. That a quarter to hire 320 people is ridiculous. And I could do it. If they gave me the budget, I know we could have achieved that. But the problem was, could the business absorb it? Could they do it? Did they understand how much work that was going to entail for them? And so we put together this great presentation, and helping them understand the amount of man hours and manpower that they were going to have to take, what from a resourcing budget perspective, what I was going to need to have it, and what they needed to commit to from their time. And once we showed them the amount of hours that they would be pulling their folks away just to do interviews alone, we extended the time. So the time extended. We had about 2 quarters to do this. We did achieve it. So I had a phenomenal team. We put a recruiter who's a lead recruiter, put him in place, built out a team underneath him, and it was all hands on deck. And it was a huge partnership between that organization and their leader, she was phenomenal. And we were just, tied at the hip for the 6 months until that was done. But that would have been my biggest haul. I mean, it panned out. If I had a quarter, there was no way it was going to happen. But fortunately, we were able to extend it and be more realistic.
That's so impressive. And it ties in nicely with your earlier comment about the spigot. The people don't get that it's not just, you know what? In a perfect world or fantasy land, that's great. Yeah, you just turn it up and you turn it down. And you can get close to that. If everything's perfect, and not even then can you get close, then it's still a matter of you got to go buy a new hose and a bigger pipe. But that's a really good point. And leveraging the team is huge. And then to tie it, put a bow on it, you're right. If you can do that, you can do anything. And I loved your comment, how humble you are, Juliet, about, what, I wish I knew, because we all compare our insides to other people's outsides. We all think, God, if they only knew that, I really don't know what I'm doing. Well, the truth is you do know what you're doing, and you did it. And that's huge. And the part about having to lay people off, and you know what, and that's the other thing I see with your job is so challenging. It's like, oh, you know what, we're going to let 20 million people go. Not tomorrow, we're going to hire 50 million people. And it's like, oh, and you're kind of just running around, but you have the data and the knowledge and the expertise to say, okay, so we're running low on time, and I want to get some more pearls of wisdom from you, Juliet. So mentoring, you kind of alluded to the importance of having a mentor and being a mentor and mentoring. And so that's the segue for the other part of the show is, and one of the things William and I really want to do, and producer Bev, is help people that are, the way to engage with companies has shifted dramatically. And it's never really been easy. Yes, it ebbs and it flows, but for a lot of us that don't really understand the dynamics and the process, and, do you have any kind of, even at just a high level, some of your observations or suggestions about, maybe I just graduated from college, or maybe I want to change jobs, but I'm afraid to because I don't know how to do it. And no one really knows how to, know how to do it, but you're kind of on the inside looking out.
Yeah. So if you're asking me for my advice on what to do from a search, I would say a couple things. One thing is, as I kind of mentioned, I'm very, I know the things that I have to absolutely have in a company before I'm going to make that change. And I think everybody needs to do it. So having a really, having a focused search is going to be great, because face it, interviewing is a full-time job. And so, I'm always very, put a list of things that I absolutely require out of the company and what I would expect from the leadership and the people and the culture, et cetera. And I kind of have that list, and I know going into these, conversations, if they're going to meet all of the things. And there are things that I won't budge with. Some might be nice to have, but there are definitely things I won't budge with. And I'm not saying, I want a snack bar and cappuccinos and all that stuff. I need to have, believe in the product, believe in the leadership, believe that they can steer the company into the right direction, and, be a very viable company moving forward. I need to, is it the work? And I really dive into the work. And so again, just being very focused and prescriptive. And like I said, even to the point of, is it B2B? Is it B2C? You can even get that granular with it. The other thing I would say is, you are, as recruiters, we are competing with hundreds of other recruiters. As a candidate, you are competing with hundreds of other candidates. So you have to differentiate yourself. And my recruiters have to differentiate themselves with other people. And so I kind of think of it from that. And so for me, I would say that, don't just apply and wait for somebody to call you, because at companies, Roku in particular, and other companies, VMware and other companies I've been at, you get hundreds of applicants for one role overnight. So I say you have to go the extra step. And, you've got LinkedIn, it's a powerful tool. Type in the company name and recruiter, and you will come up with a list of recruiters. Try to hone in on, if you're a technical person, a technical recruiter, or if you're a marketing sales recruiter, they'll typically say what type of recruiting they do. Or if it's just general, just pop in, send them an email. They send you emails. I would send them an email, say, I was interested in this role, I had applied. Is there any way you can, point me to the right recruiter if you're not the right person? Don't spam though. Nobody likes a spammer. We see them all. So don't try to spam across, but definitely be targeted and maybe poke out a couple of people to see if they can help you out. If you're fortunate and get the opportunity to come in and interview, be prepared and have done your research and your homework. Don't ask questions that you can find out on their website. And do make sure when you're talking to them, ask the questions about the culture and the role and the opportunities, absolutely. But also talk a bit about the business, so they understand that you did your homework. They understand that you're very, that you're really wanting to be there. And so I always say, go out and find, companies that have great use cases, and take a use case that resonates with you and talk that through and ask questions about that use case. Or, if articles, go into Google, type in, go to Google News and type in the name of the company, and, look up some articles. And don't be afraid to ask if there's some hard-hitting articles that are out there, so that they can explain to you. And again, this just helps us understand that you're very engaged and that you did take the time. And it's very much, very much appreciated. So those are the things, because again, you've got to stand out. And so if you do some of those extra steps, you're going to be the person who stands out. And, you may or may not have all of the qualifications. There might be somebody who's better qualified for the role, but some of those things that you asked and talked about in those conversations are going to lead that person to believe, that manager to believe that you're probably the better person for the company. So
Awesome.
I'd say just make sure you stand out.
So my question is twofold, and Andrew touched on it just briefly. One's on mentorship, and I want to get your take on mentorship, and how you view mentorship and how it's either helped you or what you've gotten out of it. And the second part of it, which is tied to it, is interview styles. Like, what do you like to do in an interview? Either an interview question or kind of stylistically, how do you like to do interviews?
Sure. So mentoring, I'll just kick off with mentoring. I I think mentoring just kind of naturally happens with folks. And I've been very, very fortunate. As I mentioned earlier, I've worked with Jonathan Schoonmaker since Marimba to VMware for a very long time. And he just happened to be my mentor. But I also had other mentors too. And I think a lot of people feel like, does a mentor, he happened to be a man and he was a phenomenal mentor for me. That's what, I like that little bit more direct style that worked for me. So, I think gender doesn't matter. It's just what style works for you. And that's what's going to be key. I never asked him to be my mentor. Quite honestly, we're still really good friends. And, he probably doesn't even realize, I think he gets it now that he was my mentor, but at the time we didn't say, will you be my mentor? Yes, I'll be your mentor. It just happened. And the other thing too, though, is always have another mentor who is outside of the HR world. And I will tend to gravitate to either a sales leader or an engineering leader. And so for me, that is, I like to have more of a business side of a mentor. And usually that happens within the companies that I'm in. I'd say at Cloudera and at VMware, they were sales leaders that were my mentors that I could kind of bounce things off of. We talked quite a bit about stuff. Again, they didn't know they were my mentor, but they did. They helped me navigate the company. And then, here I just happen to have one who's in engineering. And so, he helps me navigate. I bounce things off of him and, it's just a very kind of natural relationship. So my advice on mentoring, yes, it's phenomenal and you need it. I would get somebody who's knows your world and in your business. But I'd also look at somebody who's kind of outside your world because they can give you a very different perspective.
Juliet, that's genius.
And the other question, sorry.
I think you answered it. Did she not answer it, William? I thought she didn't.
You were fine.
You landed it.
You were great.
Well, he asked about your interviewing style, which I will actually ask you about too. Please. I want to know your out question. That's a secret. Everyone has an out question. Like, who's your favorite Sesame Street character? Oh, if it's Kermit, you're out. I mean, just so, because this is like, listen, people are going to listen to this and they're going to go, oh my, just that point about getting a mentor outside, that's genius. Yeah. And the way you address it's like so fluid. You don't have to tell them that they're your mentor. You don't even have to ask them. You just let them mentor you. Yeah. And because maybe asking them might wreck it. I mean, that's beautiful. So anyways, what's your out question? If you have one, or just your interviewing style.
I don't necessarily know if I have an out. I guess my thing is if they don't have questions, they're out. So that's my out question.
Okay.
Yes.
It drives me crazy. Everybody's answer, I'm typically in my role tend to be a last, final interviewer. And so it drives me crazy when I hear, I've asked all my questions, so thank you. So that would be my out. My interview style is probably more conversational. I like to kind of set the tone for them. I give them an overview of what the organization looks like. I help them understand how the role that they're interviewing for, fits into the organization and also fits in kind of the longer term strategy of the company. I kind of just set the tone for them. And then I'll dive into just again, more conversational of, let me talk to you about some of the challenges that we're going to have, that you'll face in this role, and why don't share some experiences that you've had in the past where you've seen similar challenges and things like that. And so I would say that's just a little bit more my style, where it's a little bit more conversational. But again, you don't ask a question, that's my out question right there.
Beautiful. Okay, well, we're almost out of time. We kind of have this thing, Juliet, at the end of the show where we say, in your job in HR, not just TA, there's a lot of weird stuff that happens, or let's say unusual. It's not weird, but do you have a weird kind of unusual without mentioning names or companies, like anything that just like, I mean, was it you, William? Someone said that the candidate brought their mom in with them. That was kind of unusual. But is there anything like something happened that you were just like, wow, where are the cameras? Like you thought Ashton Kutcher, you were getting punked, anything, just if comedic. And while you're thinking of that, I wanted to give producer Bev the opportunity. You've been a great listener, Bev. Yeah, I'm sure you've been as interested as William and I have about what Juliet's saying, but do you have any questions, Bev?
I don't have a question. I like the use of the word scrappy very much. And when you were saying how retail and food service is the entree to the free psychology course of dealing with people, I was cheering really loud on mute. So I totally agree with you there.
I will say, Bev, I've hired several people who worked at Nordstrom's because that training the managers go through is like second to none. Training they all go through is second to none.
Right.
But absolutely, I've hired like 3 or 4 people, and when I saw that they were at Nordstrom's, I'm like, sold.
Nice.
Sold.
Yeah.
I'm hiring them. So,
I'll spare you my impression of a Nordstrom customer. It's very good though.
Oh yeah, but there are lots of stories. Funny story.
It doesn't have to be like,
Yeah, I would say so. Being an agency recruiter, you are basically their manager. You're representing them. And so at Tech Systems, I was hiring contractors to work at different companies. So you kind of have to become a little like you kind of have to help, and they're IT guys, and they're really IT guys. And so I'd have to, help them dress. So I have taken somebody who came with a phenomenal AC/DC, and I'm all about AC/DC. I love it, but t-shirt to go into an interview at it was a semiconductor company. So very rigid. I'm like, let's go shopping. So I had to take him shopping and get him dressed.
That's a good one.
Oh, that's so genius.
Personal hygiene. So I have to tell them. And I had this one instance where the guy is phenomenal, but he was a desktop support engineer. Absolutely fantastic. But he kept getting held back into more of a help desk situation because of his, he needed to go to the dentist and so his personal hygiene. And so it was so bad. So I had to tell this guy that I brought him to my dentist. I had to help this guy. He was so appreciative. Nobody else would do it. And before we went to the interview, I gave him some Altoids, and I said, we had the conversations. We're walking up, and I'm like, listen, here's some of the feedback that I've gotten. So I'm going to help you. But in the meantime, we've got this interview. You got to nail it. And this is for desktop support. So I gave him a handful of Altoids. And I said,
cool.
Take one because, this will just help until we get you to the dentist. He took the whole handful and walks in, and he's crying, and I have to introduce him to the person, and he's got tears because Altoids.
All right.
So and I looked at him and I'm like, what's going on? And he's like, I took these are hot. And I go, you took them all. So anyway, I would say that's my strangest story.
That's a good one.
Love the guy, got the job, and they actually brought him on full time. So
good for you.
I don't know if he's still there, but he was there. He definitely was there for quite some time. But I would say, yeah, you have to do some crazy things as a agency recruiter. So for contractors,
Juliet, those are perfect. And by the way,
genius.
you're helping him. Like, I get we've all been there. And someone once said, if you want to hear God laugh, tell him your plan, right? But the other one I like is, if you don't think God has a sense of humor, like to your point, your nose is right above your mouth. So you would think that we all would think, and I'm no prince. I mean, you can ask my girlfriend, but it's like, if you think you have a good sense of smell, maybe you don't. So anyways, I thought that was kind of clever. Okay, listen, we are out of time. We're up against it. You have been amazing, Juliet. If people, and they're going to want to, so how do people get in touch with you, or when is your book coming out and all? Okay. But no, seriously, how do people, because someone's probably going to hear this and want to send you an email. How do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, just reach out to me. It's Juliet Peniston. I'm on LinkedIn. Send me an email. I do check it. Not on the weekends because I'm enjoying myself, but for sure I'll get back to you. So absolutely, more than happy to help anybody out.
Well, I want to just thank you on behalf of all of us. This has been incredibly rewarding and educational and fun and funny, and I'm super grateful I mean it. Thanks for taking the time. I know we all know how busy you are, so thanks, Julia.
Agreed.
No worries. Thanks for this opportunity. It was fun.
Thanks for watching this episode of Career Keynotes. For more killer content, please like and subscribe to our channel. We welcome all comments and questions and are grateful for any input regarding future content, topics, and guests. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.